Hello and welcome to the path to $1 million. Let's look at the Bitcoin chart for today, starting with the 4-hour period. This chart shows exactly what I talked about in yesterday's video, as we can see that this recent climb to the upside is now starting to level off. If you missed yesterday's film, we were trading at about 63.2 thousand. I told them, hey guys, if you look at the 1-hour RSI for Bitcoin, which is the Bitcoin momentum indicator, we were right here in this overbought area at the time. When the RSI is above 70, it means that the price has been bought too much, no matter what. I said it was likely that this RSI would reset back down to around 50, and the charts show that it did just that. We even went a little below it here. This Fibonacci golden spot is now between 62,000 and 62.7 thousand as we test it again. Right now, what should you be looking at in the charts? I also said in yesterday's video that I think this Fibonacci golden pocket will be very important for Bitcoin to figure out what will happen next. Either there will be a bounce from this Fibonacci golden pocket, in which case the price is likely to start moving up again, maybe all the way up to this next level of support at 65.5 thousand. If the price of Bitcoin falls below 62,000 US dollars, on the other hand, I think it will likely go even lower, maybe all the way down to this next big level of support. That's the 0.55 Fibonacci level at 59.5 thousand. The 4-hour RSI is another thing I'm looking at here, and it also hit overbought levels. Another thing is that the RSI will generally go back down to around 50 when it gets to an overbought level. We are getting closer to the weekend now, and the charts don't generally change much over the weekend unless there is big news. Still, I believe the best thing that could happen is that we work on this Fibonacci golden spot over the course of the weekend. Also, when the new trading week starts, the RSI will be reset. If you don't know how the RSI resets, you can do this with choppy sideways price action. If this happens, the RSI will reset down slowly. If you get bearish price action, on the other hand, it will reset down more quickly. As I said before, it can even go below 50, because when the RSI is below 50, it means that the price is going down for that time frame. But I think it's very likely that this RSI will continue to restart down to at least this 50 level here, since it's almost the weekend. Now there's one more way to look at the Fibonacci numbers. Look at this big low and compare it to this big high. This shows that we are already above this Fibonacci golden spot. Right now we've broken through above the 0.786 Fibonacci level and are now trying this level again, which is at about 62.3 thousand. This is yet another way to look at the charts. So using this one alone, you could say, well, if we lose 62,000, then we're probably going to see more bearish momentum, since we would also lose this level of support. From a bigger picture point of view, Bitcoin recently saw a complete rejection from its most recent high point, which was around 64.2 thousand. I talked about this in one of my most recent videos. For some reason, we were pushed back down, and as I said before, this is likely to happen again. If we get pushed back down from this level of resistance, we will probably fall into the next big level of possible support below it, which is between 62.4 thousand and 60,000 US dollars. Also, why do I say possible support? Well, if you look at it over shorter periods of time, you'll see that we haven't seen a big bounce from this level since we broke out above. Because of this, we can't really think of it as a level of support, since we haven't seen support hold here after breaking out above it. There was a move above right here not long ago, which is why I'm a little wary here. On top of that, I had this written in white to show that we hadn't confirmed it as a level of support yet. After that, we fell right through it and hit the next big level of support below it. But as I already said, I think it's more likely that we'll just chop around in this range over the weekend. Then maybe if we see a bounce next week, I'll mark this in blue again. This is what the 1-day time frame looks like when we zoom out from these shorter time frames. You can see that there is still this CME gap here at about $53,000 USD for Bitcoin. For those of you who don't know, more than 90% of CME gaps are filled. This means that the price will trade back to this level or one close to it at some point. But this can take a while, as I've said many times on the channel. For example, you can see that we had a CME gap right here, but the price first went up about 1514% before we turned around and filled that CME gap. For now, I think that we will eventually fill this CME gap because the odds are in our favor and trade is all about odd odds. On the other hand, you should be careful when trying to short down to a CME gap like this. Instead, you should wait for a real reversal before looking for short options down to that CME gap. It's clear that I'm not talking about much shorter periods of time. You can trade both long and short as much as you want. But I'm telling you to wait for a real reversal warning if you want to short down to the CME gap. Otherwise, you're most likely going to wreck. But that's not advice on money. This is all I'm telling you what I see in the numbers. You can use that information however you want. At some point, what would make me change my mind about this CME gap filling? Yes, it would be if we saw a break above this falling channel. Take a look at this chart. Bitcoin has been staying in this downward trend for months now, as well as if we saw a strong break above this. Then I would say that the chances of US filling the CME gap down here would go down a lot. But I don't want to guess about that right now because it's way too early to talk about a breakout of this downward channel. You've seen this on the channel many times if you've been a long time listener. Every time we got to these high points, everyone was super bullish. I thought I was one of the only people with common sense who said, hey, be careful around these highs and wait for a real confirmation of a breakout. And everyone was already having a good time talking about nice cars and all that. It's like we're going to be very wealthy. Whenever this price hit its high point, I told my clients to wait a few days. If this really was the breakout to 100,000 rupees or whatever people are talking about, then taking a long position here after the breakout at 69,000 rupees is just as good as taking a long position at 68,000 rupees before the breakout. Do you get what I mean? Because of this, I'd say the same thing now. People are talking a lot about much higher price action for Bitcoin right now, but you should be a little wary because as long as we trade within this descending channel, we can go to either the top of the range, which is about 66,000 right now, or the bottom of the range, which is 50,000 right now. No, I'm not just saying it can go up or down. I'm just explaining that in this kind of holding pattern, this is where Bitcoin will trade until it invalidates or until it really breaks either way. And Bitcoin will keep doing this as long as that doesn't happen. It could do this for months. Also, that's something to remember. First, let's look at the Bitcoin selling heat map for this past week. At the moment, there is a lot of liquidity to the downside at 57.2K, and there is still some liquidity to the upside at 64.2K. If you're not familiar with this chart, the Bitcoin price tends to move to where there is the most liquidity on it. Earlier, as you can see by these big yellow areas, the liquidity was to the upside. But now we're seeing a bit of a split where there is some liquidity to the upside and some liquidity to the downside. And when there's enough money on both sides, the market is likely to stay flat. Take a look at the 24-hour period as an example. You will see that we just took out a lot of liquidity to the downside. Things like this will happen with Bitcoin all the time. Like on the weekend, we take out a lot of cash on the fall, go backwards, take out cash to the left,